Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater. If you have not done so already, I encourage you to silence your devices and be fully present here tonight. I'm Shannon Sanova, Manager of Public Programs here at the Hammer Museum, and I want to welcome you all for tonight's panel, The Feminine Absurd, The Queer Body in Made in LA, with featured artist Marcel Alcalá, Jibz Cameron, and Young Joon Kwak, moderated by the Hammer's own Luce Curatorial Fellow, Ashton Cooper. Made in LA 2023 Acts of Living is the sixth iteration of the Hammer's biennial exhibition, highlighting the practices of artists working throughout the greater Los Angeles area. These practices embrace the value of craft, materiality, performance, and collectivity. The biennial situates art as an expanded field of culture that is entangled with everyday life, community networks, queer affect, and indigenous and diasporic histories. We have several public programs with artists in the exhibition and would love to see you all there. Please pick up a calendar on your way out and sign up for the Hammer newsletter to hear more about upcoming events, which include DJ sets, screenings, artist talks, and multisensory performances. Tonight, Ashton will introduce our panelists and share a conversation with them about their work and practice. After which, we welcome you to ask questions. And if you have a question, please wait for one of our ushers to hand you the mic. Once we conclude our conversation and Q&A, we'll have some light refreshments in the courtyard where we can continue what I'm sure will be a fascinating conversation. Now I'm honored to introduce Ashton Cooper, who will share background on the panelists as well as the thematic considerations of the panel. Ashton is the Luce Curatorial Fellow here at the Hammer, where she was part of the team for Made in LA 2023 Acts of Living. Her projects focus on the history of painting and sculpture in the United States after 1960 and examine gesture, abstraction, and expression from queer, feminist, and anti-racist perspectives. As an independent curator, she's organized 9 solo and group exhibitions in nonprofit and gallery spaces in New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, and Vienna. She regularly writes criticism for Art Forum, and other recent writing projects include a catalog essay on the groundbreaking feminist artist Renate Bertelmann for her retrospective at the Belvedere 21 in Vienna, and the text The Feminine Absurd for the Made in LA 2023 catalog. This year, she earned a PhD in art history from USC, and her dissertation is How Hard to Give Form to Oneself Honestly, Liberation, Politics, and the Remaking of Painterly Expression in 1970s New York. I can't wait to read it. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ashton Cooper.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Just want to say thank you so much to Shannon and Claudia and our public program team, also to Marcel, Jibz, and Young Joon for being here, and also to Diana and Pablo, who are the co-curators of Made in LA. I'm going to introduce the artists, and then they'll come out. So Marcel Alcalá received a BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2012. Their work has been included in recent solo exhibitions at Night Gallery, Los Angeles, Mickey, Chicago, Delhi Gallery, New York, and Gallery Frangoulian in Paris. Recent group exhibitions include The Mistake Room, Lyles and King, Anat Egby, Ballroom Marfa, Simon Lee Gallery, and the Swiss Institute. They were an artist in residence at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, 2022. Young Joon Kwak is a multidisciplinary artist whose work spans sculpture, performance, video, sound, and community-based collaborations. Along with their frequent collaborator Marvin Astorga, they co-founded Mutant Salon, a beauty salon and platform for collaborative performances and art installations with their community of queer, trans, BIPOC artists and performers in their art studio in 2012 while pursuing their MFA at USC. Mutant Salon has since mounted art and performance extravaganzas internationally, including at Red Cat, The Broad, the Hammer Museum, and the Serendipity Arts Festival in Goa, India. They are the lead performer in Zena Zerner, their electronic noise rage dance diva band with Astorga, whose performances combine DIY and power electronics, mutated vocals, and bad drag to expand ideas on queer and trans bodies and to create collective experiences of catharsis and healing for diverse audiences at house parties, bars, music and performance venues, and art institutions internationally. Zena Zerner released their debut album Die in 2012, and their follow-up, Queens of the Night, was released in April 2018. Jibz Cameron is a performance and video artist living in Los Angeles, performing multimedia work as alter ego Dynasty Handbag. Over the last 15 years, Cameron has combined tragedy and comedy at such institutions as MoCA, PS1, Joe's Pub, The Kitchen, Red Cat, the Broad Museum, the Hammer Museum, and the New Museum, among others. The New York Times has heralded her as, quote, the funniest and most pitch-perfect performance seen in years, and New York Magazine has called her outrageously smart, grotesque, and innovative. Cameron has written and produced 7 evening-length performance pieces and countless short works that have been performed in clubs and venues internationally. She has also produced multiple video works and 3 albums of original music. She is a 2022 Guggenheim Fellow, a 2020 Creative Capital Awardee, and a 2021 United States Artist. Her film Weirdo Night, made with director Mariah Garnett, is an official Sundance Film Festival 2021 submission. She also produces and hosts Weirdo Night, a monthly experimental comedy and performance event in Los Angeles and New York. So we can welcome the 3 of them. So before I launch into questions, I wanted to just give y'all kind of a sense of the concept behind the panel. Marcel, Jibz, and Young Joon are all installed in the same section of Made in LA, together with Paige Person and Pippa Garner, and probably some of you were lucky enough to see them perform in Weirdo Night together earlier this month. Pablo and Diana thought of them as sort of an imprecise intergenerational genealogy. They all work in and belong to queer communities. They all work between performance and object making. They use their bodies, identifications, and communities as subject matter and material. Broadly, these practices allow us to consider the important contributions of queer makers to our very understanding of what art can be, where its boundaries exist, and the pleasure in dissolving them. The title of this panel, The Feminine Absurd, is the same as the essay that I wrote for our catalog, wherein I explore how these artists each kind of plumb the depths of so-called femininity or femaleness in their lives and practices, but treat the subject with a healthy dose of absurdism, satire, clowning, play, and drag. These artists investigate the visual materialization of gender and insist on the capaciousness of its iterations and inanities. So the feminine absurd is one way of naming a particular strategy shared among these practices. They interrogate the materialization of gender and inhabit its mutability, treating this pursuit with humor and outlandishness. So a foundational part of all of your practices is that you do performance, but you also make objects. Jibz, you do Dynasty Handbag, and we have your drawings in the show. Marcel, you often perform as a payaso or clown figure, and we have your paintings. And then Young Joon makes paintings and sculptures and is Zena Zerner and also doing Mutant Salon. So I just wanted to briefly kind of click through some slides and ask each of you to talk about how your object making practices and your performance practices relate. So let's start with Jibz. Jibz, could you talk about the origins of your drawing practice and how drawing and Dynasty Handbag are interrelated?
It's funny to see.
I also have this slide if you...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can... yeah, either one, I don't care. It's all the same drawing. You know what I mean? Like, every drawing is the same drawing, kind of. Well, I do have, like, a pretty concise, like, history with drawing, and and the feminine absurd. I've been thinking about that phrase a lot. Also, thank you for having me, everyone, and thank you all for coming. And it was so nice to be with you two again. And I was just shredding the stage few days ago. Here I am speaking eloquently. When I was in junior high school, I was a little bit, I didn't like it. And I was a weirdo, and I had my best friend and I would draw all the time. And one of the things we would do is we would take Archie comics and draw the sexy, like Betty and Veronica's super sexy bods. But then we would always like cut their heads off and make them bleeding, or like have like a barf bag like on their head, and we would also like torment other kids with our drawings. Like we would put them in people's lockers and like just as disgusting as we could be. And I think I didn't know it at the time, but it was my queer resistance to the heteronormative patriarchal cis white blah 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 blah. But I definitely feel like that's at the root of it all, and it kind of hasn't stopped, and I just keep doing the same thing. But the other thing I'll mention is that drawing and performance, both to me, are like immediate gratification. They're really like, they both have like physical energy in them that I feel is really like tactile and like right there. And so, and I've been drawing since I was a kid, and I just started exhibiting recently, so it's pretty exciting to have it be recognized and have these parallels drawn with the performance stuff that's a little bit more well-known for me.
Totally. And this is a drawing
Again,
that was part of a
guy.
performance. So sometimes drawing makes its way into the performances too, right?
Yeah, in fact, my latest big project, Titanic Depression, which is coming to LA soon. Somebody, anyone, producer, has a ton of my drawings in it, and they're animated, and I draw a lot of animals, and this is a map of, this was from a performance that was based on the classic, the Iliad. I don't know if you've heard of it, but this guy went on a journey, and it was kind of about, like really being horrified by my own body, and so the journey is like through my own body, and I entered through, a big pussy, of course. Where else? And you end, and it's kind of corny. It's like I think the brain is where all the answers are, but it's really the heart, and I go through this like artist colony in here, and it's like a lot of that kind of stuff. But a lot of the performance has the map in it and kind of guides you during the performance. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Young Joon, will you give us a sort of intro to the relationship between your object making and performance practices?
Yeah, sure. So this is a slide of Mutant Salon on the right, and just an image, just one of many random images during a Mutant Salon event with me and a collaborator, Alice Kunt, and and Mutant Salon grew out of Zena Zerner, so I could talk about Zena Zerner, but like I think the performance, there it is, yeah. Performance kind of feeds into my like object making practice in several different ways. Like I think that first of all with like drag, I started performing in like queer nightlife venues, and I feel like drag was like kind of my entrance into sculpture in a way, or like, I'm a material girl, like just like kind of that's how I learned like kind of the way that like materials can be taken apart, put back together, reconfigured, to re-signify, and how, materials can connote like identity and then like Zena Zerner started because I was just tired of like lip syncing to like, you know, I wanted to like voice my own things rather than like just like lip syncing like to silently to like another person's desires, and then like would also use a vocal modulator, like a vocal transformer, I still do, and like to kind of like shift my voice from sounding like a little baby to like deep voice man to like cyborg to just noise, but it's also crucially just about like the interactions with the people on the dance floor, and like a lot of times it's like, you know, that immediate connection that happens on the dance floor, and sometimes it's between strangers where, you know, it's like nonverbal all of a sudden, but like you're able to like instantly connect with somebody across these like boundaries of difference, and you know, I get so much out of that. You know, it's not just like you know, I learn so much from the performers too, and that like kind of reciprocal interaction. I feel like I think about that a lot with my sculptures, objects, and but yeah, Mutant Salon came out of that community too, and at like Zena Zerner shows where I would meet a lot of people who, artists, performers who existed like outside of the art world largely, and didn't have studios, and I needed to make my studio into something of like a dressing room because I didn't feel safe to like get made up in my own apartment in like my neighborhood, and so just wanted to extend that safe space and like collaborate with them, and you know, and then like my, you know, and my friends like in Mutant Salon, like the community, and like Zena Zerner, just like, you know, they appear in my sculptures, like all the cast bodies and stuff like that are just yeah, of like people in my community. And I think about the objects kind of extending my community into different spaces in a way, to a different audience. But I would just also say that like, you know, and it's like very different audiences too. You know, from like a house party or moldy basement and stuff like that, where I'm like addressing and speaking to like my community, or like a sports bar, or like a music venue, or like the audience at the Hammer, for example. You know, I'm very like cognizant of the fact that I'm like presenting work to people that maybe like encountering Mutant Salon or Zena Zerner, or just like me on the street, you know, just would not want to engage. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Let's just talk more about my...
There we go. The button is a little sticky on the clicker. Marcel, could you talk to us about Payasa and your painting practice and how those relate?
So, repression saved my life. I feel like the idea of this like feminine absurd, I recently was watching videos of myself as a kid, and I was like, that bitch was femme and absurd. And the world tried to repress my poor little gorgeous heart. And growing up in like a household where I didn't necessarily practice Santeria, but my brother did. And my brother was older than me, also queer. And I just took a lot of learning from performance art in that aspect. Like sacrifices, tambores, where people get possessed. And then when I went to school, well, actually no, I went to art school, and that shit just like tore me down. It was like identity, like what the fuck is that? Welcome and look at this digital technology. Then I graduated, was broke as fuck, and was like, I met great people here, but okay, I'm in debt now, babes. And then I moved back to California. And then I was like, what the fuck, as like school will do to you. And then I started just faking being a clown on social media. And I would be like on my way to work, but I wasn't working anywhere. And for me, reaching the clown was this like interesting moment where I was like, the clown is like a queer NB icon, lives outside of the constructions of like class, so I could poke fun at things, but because I'm using comedy, I can be real. I can make fun of the rich person, but also be like, girl, will you buy me that taco? I can make fun of the broke queen and be like, me too. And through this like fake performancing online, especially this was like Tumblr era, I started getting jobs doing performances. And then I was like, what do I even do? Like I just put clown makeup on. And then I started going to LA and like performing at Mustache Mondays or performing at like the Hammer, curating shows at a McDonald's because McDonald's is a clown icon. So I would curate exhibitions there, people do performances, you know.
And it was called McPoems.
And it was called McPoems. Duh. And through these like performances and like Mustache, I also knew of Young during like this era too. Like that's where I met so much of my community. Mustache was like a good place for different performance groups to all come, showcase their pieces, and then leave. And that's how we met like everybody. And yeah, through basically lying about being a performance artist, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go study with La Pocha Nostra, kind of get like an understanding of like border, what does that mean? And then what does it mean to be inside a border and space and blah. Yeah, so that's how performance came to me.
Would y'all skip to the next slide, please? You can keep talking. There's just a great performance still of you on the next slide. My clicker's not working.
Someone get the clicker to work.
Her clicker is sticky and she can't move forward. Sticky.
So yeah, I mean through basically lying, I started like and working with La Pocha Nostra, I was like, okay, I think I understand like what I want, and I want to be absurd. I want to be fun with little sparkles of seriousness. This is one of the performances that I did with ACT UP in New York, where I did a full fashion line, and at the end I basically was like, who cares? And was giving shots to everybody in the audience. They all manifest themselves differently depending on the space. Then, you know, like, I feel like a lot of performance artists, I was taken advantage a lot of the time, not paid well. I know, it's crazy. Do they do that to you too? And I was like, I need more autonomy in my practice because performing, it can be actually expensive for the artist, and like buying all the objects, buying all the things, and then, you know, you get drink tickets and like whatever. I mean, which is iconic. I was young, it's worth it. Now it's like, let's get diva. So I started making drawings, works on paper, super cheap. I would spend like $5, and then I would like hustle it to people. And through that kind of trajectory, I also would like show objects from the performances in like group shows, and then try to sell drawings. And then during the pandemic, we got the 10K because I lost my job. Woo! And invested that in painting. And through like connections of performing in all these amazing spaces, I started to be able to show the paintings and kind of depict these performance ideas in still image through painting. And that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So while we're on the subject of performance, I just wanted to bring it back to Young Joon, especially. If you could just click through 1, 2, 3 more, just so people can kind of get a sense of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So you cast this sculpture from your own form wearing your drag accoutrement. And I just wanted to ask you about how drag relates to the camouflage, your use of rhinestones. If you could just kind of give us a little bit of a sense of what you were thinking about when you were making this body of work.
Well, yeah. So I had. So the works in the show are. I have like 3 sculptures and 3 paintings. Kind of, they're in like pairs, and each of the pairs have like patterns of close-ups of chameleon skins, and camouflaging, and like each of the sculptures kind of camouflage against these rhinestone paintings and of the chameleon skins, and then on the sculptures are kind of like on the other side. They're the impressions. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but that's like concave, like on the where you can see like it kind of like a fossil or something like that, like the impression of 3 kind of like transitioning bodies in a way. Includes like me and my friend Charlie with his chest binder on, and a cast of my friend Kim when she's like 9 months pregnant. And just wanting to put these like different bodies in conversation with each other, and kind of, kind of like, I feel like, putting like a pregnant woman in conversation with like, these other like transgender bodies, whatever, and like just, as a way of like kind of trying to connect with other folks in the way of like thinking that all of our bodies are transitioning in one way or another, and and I mean, I love sparkles, rhinestones, but then when I was like looking for examples of camouflage in nature, and thought about like, chameleons, and then in my research I found out that like so chameleons have like the way by which they change colors is like they have little nanocrystals that are iridescent in each of their, in their skin cells, and they can reflect any wavelength of light, and it's not like, they change color when they get excited, when they see a male sees another male, when they want to communicate with each other. It's not about hiding necessarily, but it's like when they get excited, their skin stretches, and then these nanocrystals in their skin cells can just reflect any wavelength of color, light in their environment, in their surroundings. And so, I just thought that was perfect.
And how does using these kind of strategies of abstraction or camouflage help you or us think about bodies and gendered bodies in a more expansive way?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm showing the impressions of these bodies, and so they're like concave, and like I think that rather than like I think a lot about just like wanting the active experience of like the material too, and like how that kind of like I think about the performance of the viewer in a way, how these rhinestones can kind of like seduce people to come like closer, and the way that they can kind of and like people look at them from different angles, and it's just like a much more active experience of like viewing these iridescent crystals, and then before they know it, they're like in the space of these bodies, like kind of like in the theater of the installation, they can be camouflaged themselves, like, in between the sculpture and the painting. And, and again, like I wanted to like just even the titles, like to see yourself reflected in our chameleonic transformations. And, you know, I want to like not present like a complete static, singular, like whole monolithic body, but like have like entry points for people to come in and kind of imagine, you know, filling in the gaps of like that absent body. You know, what could this like body be? Like, what could it look like? What could it, you know, what could it do? And yeah, and like the sculptures, like they're all called to refuse looking away from our transitioning bodies, and just thinking about that kind of moment of recognizing or like assigning identification to a body, you know, and like how in that moment like people are like really quick to do so, or maybe like, you know, I think even like liberal people who like love trans people or something like that, like, you know, but then you know, still allow for like legislation to go by that, like, you know, like anti-trans legislation. I think that it's just like, oh, they, you know, like look away and just wanting to kind of keep people from looking away from our bodies. Yeah.
It's really interesting thinking about trying to appeal to as wide an audience as possible and kind of capture curiosity from anyone, but also I would imagine you're thinking about your peers and your friends and also wanting the work to really resonate with them as well. And I think all of you in certain ways allow for that kind of moment of curiosity from people who are maybe far removed from whatever various communities, but also I think speak very specifically, I'm sure, to your friends and families and chosen families. Can we go to next slide, please? Okay, so Marcel.
What's that, girl? Period.
Could you do one more slide? Okay, so the painting on the left, the encounter, and the painting on the right, what's on the other side must be better than this. I wanted to ask you about themes of exploration, self-exploration, self-encounter. Both paintings have this kind of portal-like element, interior spaces that open to a wider vista. I was wondering if you could talk about those themes and how you think of them.
I'm goth. It's funny that we were like talking about like how to connect with an audience that isn't like literally like our community, and I feel like painting was a good way for me to do that. My performances were very like about the fucking situation at hand. You are seeing it, you know, the body is present,
and you really go into the audience too.
I love
the
audience.
Yeah.
And yeah, so with like for example, my parents were like, "Oh my god, we love the paintings. Everything else we don't fucking understand at all." And I'm like, "Well, that's cool. Like, I do want like my parents to also like my work. That's my new thing." But with these paintings in particular, I'm always like kind of like a existential disaster artist. I'm always like, what else is going on? There's more to existence than the actual body. And with this newer work, I'm definitely been thinking about that. Like, yeah, portals, dreams, how shitty it can be to be in America, how like shitty it can be to that the light refracts a certain image, therefore you're projected onto others, and then people just look at you and have this idea of who you are without knowing your name. And it's sad and depressing, and I just like to work through it in the work. What's on the other side must be better than this. It's like the questioning of like what, like, okay, they're about to go into like this desert nothingness, so it must be pretty bad. And also, what is in that space and what are they running from? The encounter is, yeah, like I said, like the skin suit of like our experience. And it's not even meant to be morbid. I think they're like pretty like fun. Painting can do that, right? Colors. And just like this skeleton is excited to hang out with the other skeleton because it doesn't have to deal with this fucking like projection. I'm spiritual.
You also put a lot of sort of symbolic objects into the paintings, various plants and insects, different kinds of clothing or settings. Could you talk a little bit about the symbolic aspect of your work?
Yeah, I think that also comes with just growing up like Catholic and Santero. It's like every color means a certain thing. Every object is like an homage to an orisha or a spirit. On the left, I wanted to use like a dead plant that's still upright next to this like luscious living plant that was like, I think in most maybe SoCal houses. I don't even know the name of it. And then on the right, I just, the bee is like a quintessential like symbol for like just what's going on in the world and how we're treating them is just like on the bigger scope is how we're treating ourselves as people. And masks, I mean, I think a lot of the masking comes from the fact that I've been making masked work my whole like art career through the clown as a mask. And then the drawings were like smiley sad faces, which were interested in like the comedy, tragedy, duality of life and spaces. And sometimes I just put shit on there. And people are like, that's deep.
Can we go to the next slide, please? And then the next one. And then one more. Thank you. So, Jibz, you also have a lot of evocative objects, maybe with a more overtly satirical, humorous tone than the others. Mm-hmm. You seem to often be drawing from pop culture or your experiences of queer community antics. Can you talk about some of the things that you're drawing from when you make the work? And if we could go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about like really trying to really ask these questions to myself seriously. Like, what is this? Like, what was I thinking when I was doing this? And frankly, Ashton, I don't fucking know. Okay, so can I have my check? No, I'm kidding. It's sort of. Although the one on the female executive executioner is, I made a lot of drawings during the Pando, and I was on a lot of Zoom meetings, and I really just had a notebook out and was just drawing and drawing and drawing, and those are really the best pieces that I make are when it's actually not coming from a place of like direct consciousness. And to speak to your, like what you said about sometimes I just put shit in there. One of the best pieces of like guidance I ever received from a mentor was that, if the impulse is there, follow the impulse. You don't have to know what the impulse is for. The fact that it's there, there's the answer is in the question almost. I was writing a performance and I was like, I don't know why, but I really want to be this bear. And she was like, be the bear. And it became like a whole, I was like, I don't know why. And then I did, unpack it at some point. I wanted to learn about bears. I wanted to inhabit, this simple thing of like, what's it like to just be trying to get food all fucking day long, like that's your only job, basically. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But I do think it's like, all of these images, like, I really don't know, like, where they come out of. Like, I think I can tell you what I think and feel about femininity and absurdity and how important it is to entertain oneself, and like being connected to a higher force through creative action is like basically the only way, you know, that's my direct way into some sort of like greater energy. And because I don't know where, you know, it's like, where the hell does it come? I don't know where it comes from. Like, I don't know. And, but I am like I think a lot of it has to do with you know, I think about representation a lot and regurgitation and like, you know, very similar, like deconstruction and rebuilding in the way that I see what I actually see in it. You know, like this one on the right to me is like, it's like kind of like a spoofing on like a powerful woman. Like I'm like, you know, just like that. It's like I'm speaking about a trope, I think is what it is like I'm speaking about this thing of like, she's a dynamo sexually, and she's also like, you know, but her vaginas, and I'll eat you up, but I'll tell you, but she's also like kind of has a whip and is like, but, you know, has these like boss boots on a little bit and is like, I'm going straight to the top of this corporation. Okay? And no glass ceilings, I'm going to break it with my lightning bolt, you know, and like, that's some sort of like goal for women or, you know, I mean, I'm from the 80s, so it's not exactly the same goal as it is now contemporarily, but like that is sort of like a reconstruction of that trope that I kind of have been ingesting my whole life, being a very American person who grew up in the 80s and 90s and sort of like digesting all of these images. And I, you know, and I can just say this too, is that like representation is so intensely powerful and so intensely why things are so fucked for so many reasons. And just like the layers of it are is like mind-boggling to me, like what we ingest, you know, and it's all become kind of like rote language around it, like the idea of representation, but it is absolutely mind-boggling what we are given as standards of beauty, of success, of, and not just with women, I'm talking about like, you know, across the board, just here. Art. And just advertising and capital being what is the most important thing in this structure, you know, that we're all trying to like fit into in some way, get a piece, but also like not exactly, but like you can't do both things. Like it's, you know, and I think the one on the left is, you know, we had some rats in my house, you know, and I was just thinking about, I mean, okay, come on, y'all. This one's about gentrification. Let's get real, okay? You know what I'm saying? Like, just like, oh, I hate bugs and rats, and like, oh, I just want to be comfortable. You know, like thinking about cleanliness and coziness and human, you know, where we belong and how we're supposed to be in this like sanctified thing that's like separate from nature. And, you know, and that it all ultimately kind of fucks us. I think also my car battery died, so I was thinking about the shape of a car battery and those clamps, which are so cool. And, you know, just hating, you know, I don't know, just also just relationships with animals is similar to what you were saying about the bee. I love that. Like, just throw that bee in there. Like a rat is like a big, like talk about representation. Rats. It just sucks,
we need
you
more
know?
rat representation.
For real though. I'm not trying to be funny. I just naturally am this way. But I do feel like that's very huge for me. It's very I want things to be seen differently, you know, I guess, for myself.
I think of you as being such a great satirist, and it's funny because it's funny to hear you talk about female executive executioner as kind of being this like 80s business woman, because I immediately thought of like hashtag girl boss, which I think is like our current version of that. And I think
Thank you for bringing it into the contemporary moment.
Well,
Ashton, you youngster, you glowing-faced youngster.
And I'm gonna do it again. I also thought of uncomfortability, and I also thought of uncomfortability. It's interesting to hear the rat backstory, because I was like, oh, this is about goop. This is about wellness culture. Like, this is about, like, I read this whole thing into it, but I do think, like,
You know what? All of my work is about goop, actually. It really kind of is. Yeah, anyway, continue.
no, I would like,
Yeah.
expand on that.
Just sort of like an encapsulation of, the toxicity. I mean, self-care industrial complex is like really real. And I definitely feel like just the straight up odd caucasity, as my friend said the other day, of something, making these. I mean, do I have to explain it?
No.
It's so bad.
No,
it's just
okay.
like, taking everything, just taking, and then packaging, and then, this is how we do it. Like, this is what it's supposed to look like to be healthy, well, safe, like aware, you're living your best life. Like, it's madness. It's really like dark.
Speaking of a rosy pink glow, could you go to the next slide, please? So this is one of my personal favorites.
I know the feet are really good, I have to say.
It's
really hard to
an
draw
incredible
feet.
take on the self-portrait, and in fact, there are elements of self-portraiture, I think, in all three of y'all's practices. Would y'all go to the next slide, please? So yeah,
I have the biggest balls. But clearly, look, who's the man? Me. Or is that a butt? I don't know, actually. Badalls. Anyway.
It's cunt.
Yeah, you're right. It is cunt.
Whoever wants to take the floor, I'm interested to hear if you think of your work as self-portraiture in any aspect of it.
I really think, I think it always is for every artist, period. Like, no matter what kind of object, a poem, a blah, I think that's inherent. And I've been thinking about this a lot, because there's some paintings that I make that look like me, and I feel like I was making that work because it was during an era where I felt like I couldn't represent others other than my own experience, in terms of like cancellation of others and all that stuff. And I was like, I'm just looking within. Plus, it was like COVID, and I'm like, oh, who am I with? Myself. So this piece, actually, Midnight at La Poubelle, I think I was trying to bring in others into the mix, and I'd like to do more work like that, because at the end of the day, right next to the title of our piece, what does it say? Our name. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's me, but but I mean, constricted by this, the constraints of the like binder, like, yeah, constraints of femininity, or and I think that I use my body and a lot of my work just like out of convenience and stuff like that. But I think that like also I don't want to get fixated on like the image of my body or being me, because I try to, I think that's where abstraction comes in too. And I don't and also where drag comes in too, because it's like it's me but it's not it's not me. And it's kind of like these like that like corset, the binding and stuff like that, and like the padding and stuff like that, that's a kind of, that's like bringing forth like the projections of like desire onto, my body. That's like outside of myself in a way. And yeah, I mean, if anything, I hope that also people that like kind of come to it thinking that like, maybe they can imagine, like using my body to kind of try to imagine like other sorts of bodies, or like gesturing toward like, other ways of like existing in the world could also, maybe inspire them to kind of imagine that for themselves in a way.
Uncanny likeness. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. This was another one of those drawings, I think, that just happened. In my time on Earth, I've drawn so many cock and balls and so many boobs. I've drawn so many pumps that look like that. That's Betty and Veronica pumps, like literally. So yeah, and I think this kind of like I am a lot of times when I draw a figure, it always has multiple genitalia of all kinds. That's the general vibe. And I think for me, like, I've never really felt, I guess like it's, I guess the way it speaks to me as self-portraiture is that, besides having giant ball sack, is that, like the human body is absurd and is like diverse beyond our comprehension. And, we're all born naked, the rest is drag, etc. kind of vibe. Like, we don't really understand what anyone's stuff does, likes, looks like. It's like a lot of it's about desire too, just like, fantasy. I mean, not to say that's my fancy, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. I want to tell you guys something about that you have to check out, which is a new television show that's called Naked Attraction. Has anyone heard of this? Okay. Girl. It just 20 minutes of it. I mean, it is really extraordinary. Like, it's basically like a dating show where one person comes on the show and looks at 5 or 6 people naked, but they're from the bottom up. So the first thing they see is the first woman who goes likes men. She's a man like her, and she. So it's all just like cock and balls, and everything is like. It's so ridiculous. It looks ridiculous. It's like all you want to do is laugh, but it's like, everybody's, and they show you their cocks, like really, and this is, I mean, I keep being like, Andy Warhol, you really should be alive right now, but like.
They show full dick?
Full dick.
Like for us, the audience.
Oh, yeah. And puss, like meat flap, like just and everybody looks different. And I'm not saying like everybody's different and everybody's beautiful. That's not what this is at all. It's more just like, it's like, look at it, And these people are supposed to judge like whether they're attracted to these body parts. It's so wild. This one guy, he has this like pretty good looking penis, like as for his penis, I guess. And it's all shaved. And then he has like an elephant head tattoo around it. And they show that, and it's just like, what is happening right now? Like, with representation, but it's kind of extraordinary because it's British. So they don't all look like, like, they look like people. You know what I'm saying? They look like people. Anyway, I thought about it. I thought about our artwork like so much while I was watching it. I was just like, this is amazing. Like it is absurd looking and cool in a way. It's not hot though. Like it's just sort of like, wow, cool. Like it's almost like when you go to like Wee Spa and you're just like, look at that bush, look at that butt. Like it's cool. It's just like investigative and that's not representation though. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I mean, what you were saying about that kind of really resonated with me, just like, you know, in terms of like the goop. I mean, you know, all of like the messiness and the kind of all the things that aren't accounted for, you know, that really, that I so identify with, like in your work.
Thank you. Yeah, ditto. Yeah, same.
What I loved about the grouping of artists that we were in was that, I mean, as queer people, we're always kind of questioning notions of gender. And so like this idea of like, okay, this work is about me. It's like, it's about our experience within that. And then there's like, I'm Mexican, you know, whatever, like, and so I see that in the work. It's like, like understanding gender, questioning gender through art making. And, you know, I think like there's finally enough space for us to be able to have these conversations in institutions like this, where,
Yes, thank you, Hammer. Yeah.
where, you know, like, you know, but I'm sure you guys get this a lot, like, what's it like? You know, or like, what, but, you know, and then we go to like a white abstract painter and everyone's like, fucking slay. And like, what is the work about? It's about fucking everything. And our work is also about fucking everything, but through a queer lens.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question about that, because all of you are choosing to work in figuration to some extent. And in terms of the politics of trying to represent queer bodies, represent gender, whatever form it may be taking, do you think about that? Like, do you worry about pitfalls? Are there things you like really want to try to put in, or things you really don't want to put in, like in terms of just like the politics of using figuration to represent queer bodies?
I think so. I mean, I think there's like some work where I try not to put figure in it at all, and it just be about like a moment. And recently I've been thinking a lot about abstraction, which I love what you're doing here, Young Joon, and like with these like back pieces, because I think you know, this is so, I don't know if this is worth having a conversation about, but I think like people like us should try out abstraction and like take away this thing, you know? But we're lucky because we have like an art history book thick as fuck. So like there is potential to use all the different mediums to approach your work. And we're kind of perfect examples of that because we performed, which is the most like, I don't want to say derelict, but it's like the most punk shit. Yeah, but I did. But it's like, it's punk, you know? We're trying to create, or we are and have been using as any means, like any means to showcase an idea, and that is through presence and like, yeah, performance. And I don't know, yeah, the older I get, I feel like I'm getting crafty, you know, spending more time with myself, therefore creating these objects. But anyways, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Wait till you get to bird watching, girl. Can I speak about one thing that I want to talk about, just a little bit about rage, because when Young Joon, like your pieces in the show, to me, like I feel like they're so powerful. The hanging sculptures, like seeing them from, you know, the bedazzled side, and then the sort of like rage of the concave, like, this is what I thought when I saw this. Do you understand how fucking hard it is to do shit like this? Like, do you understand do you idiots who want to like ban drag or whatever even that phrase means, like, have any idea how this is related to art and expression? Like, do you have no soul? Like, the rage I felt in seeing that, and I don't even know if that's whatever, that might not be true for you, but just like, because you put this like other side of like what's inside, that it's like, you know, it's like also what's underneath, what holds it all together. And, you know, it looks like kind of ashen and like relic and stuff. And you said it was also like amalgamation of different bodies. And it's just an interesting like push and pull of like what it, like, I guess too, just trying to translate like the difficulty in like, you know, having a gender expression that's not widely accepted, and B, just being a fierce fucking drag queen that takes so much work. Like, I don't know if that is like speaks to you, but I also feel like I was like enraged by those in a good way. Like, I was like, oh yes. Like, you know, I mean, they're exquisite. They're like so amazing, but like it brought up a lot of feelings in that way for me. But I don't know if that's a thing for you. And I definitely feel like with my work, a lot of it is about my rage that I have a difficulty expressing in other ways. But on stage and in my drawing, I definitely can like speak to it. I don't know. Did that translate to you? I feel like I'm like, oh, I overstepped. I was like, is it about this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like rage, but also I was just thinking about how ridiculous it was as I was making it, and like, you know, like, look at me and my fat pussy, like, like, and just like the joy too, and like the kind of like, yeah, like the absurdism of it, you know, and yeah, but then also just like seeing me in it, like that me.
that me.
But I mean, I was thinking about how I love that, like hearing from you to that, you know, you mentioned that you've been giving tours of the show, and you had like a group of older, like senior women who saw this piece and like identified with the girdle aspect or something like
She
that.
was
Like, oh yeah, I know what's
girdles
going
are
on
back. And I was like, yeah, they are. They are.
there. Like, I love that, you know? Me and, you know, those ladies are like, see each other.
You've experienced the same pain. Yeah. Should we open it to questions?
Looking like a pretty smart audience. Step it up.
I think there's someone in the middle.
Sorry, got there first. I have an earnest but kind of stupid question. What did you think about the Barbie movie?
I thought it was fierce. But You know,
I thought that was it, but no, keep going.
or I don't know. This is an interesting question because I was in Fire Island and everyone, you know, was with the intellectual art crew and they were like going the fuck off, and I was like, damn, I think I'm tired. And I went and I saw it. I enjoyed it. I watched it with literally all Long Island little white girls wearing pink, and they were like, yes, slay! And I was like, that's cute. Anyways, that's whatever.
I enjoyed it. I did. I don't know what is good or not. You know what I mean? Like, if I enjoy it, I'm watching, I'm into it. I don't care. That's what good is for me. Like, and I do not like the outrage that this was a 2-hour-long advertisement was like, girl, what did you think it was? It's a movie about Barbie, which is a toy by Mattel. Like, I was just like, could not believe how much responsibility people were throwing on this fucking dumb movie. I was just like, they're trying something. It's definitely not my cup of feminism, but it's something. Who cares? Kind of, who cares? Who cares? Actually, and also, I don't like any of the other films that person has made, so I was happy to like that, you know? And I left. I thought, if I had a big budget, holy shit. And you know what? I did experience, I had Barbies, and I had, one of the things I loved about Barbies, and I also had Matchbox cars, it was the same kind of thing. I like to build their houses out of shoe boxes. I would have a big salad bowl full of water and put a plant next to it and be like, it's her pool. So, you know, I did feel a few of those moments of like, this was an important thing for whatever. I'm shutting up right now. The end. Barbie movie was awesome.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember like much of it. I know that like I remember feeling for Barbie at one point. I mean, just like, you know, the whole like dynamic of, you know, she's doesn't want to be kind of like newly out of the box or something like that, and like wanting to like find some sort of agency, but, you know, not knowing how, and but still kind of like trying to move toward that or something like that. Like I kind of but then also I remember it being kind of just like thinking it was a little bit like just like boys versus girls, like this very like simplistic, you know, binary being set up again. But yeah,
Didn't really take care of that very well.
but yeah.
Hi. I really love that all of your work can exist in very different spaces, whether it be a museum, drag club, comedy theater, McDonald's. How did you think about developing this work to be so flexible?
That's such a good question. I think it's just like, I don't know, really wanting to be an artist and using like any sort of space to your advantage to like create conversations, build relationships with the community, and also hustle. So I think that's where I come from.
I would say a similar response that, you know, I've used this term a lot, but the Kembra Fowler term, availabilism, of like what's there. And also like I've always been very contained because I have some punk damage of like, I'll never have any money. So, you know, I've always stayed very like, it's my little bag, and like I've toured, you know, with a cassette, and, you know, I know, or like an iPod or one of those things, like, yeah. So it's also like a practical thing, but you know, I mean, as we all know, that's like the mother of invention, right? Like, what do you got? How can you serve it up like that? I think it's very, very served me very well because I can be in all different kinds of spaces and comfortably. This kind of space was actually the least comfortable. Not in this moment, but like, well, now it's okay. I mean, I've done it quite a bit at this point, but like, you know, getting used to a larger, more formal environment with resources took some time, and still is. I'm still learning about that, you know. Like, I just had a very large budget show. It was a theater piece, and it was uncomfortable and, you know, difficult to figure out. I just wanted to give all the money away, and I did. But, you know, yeah, so, but I don't ever want to be confined to, I don't want to have a space dictate my body. That's the whole point of it, in a way, is that I can move around and stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna, you know, kind of riff off of that. I was just gonna say, like, trauma.
Yeah, PS trauma.
Not wanting to, you know, maybe not like, you know, again, like maybe being like feeling stuck or like in, put in like, you know, insufficient like categories of bodies, or like just these categories themselves, like kind of, yeah, you know, the, like these representations of bodies not being enough and stuff like that, and so just like having to make our own spaces in a way, and yeah.
Yeah, when there's not enough representation, it's important to be flexible.
The more you know.
Hi, I really admire all of your work because there's something in sociology called symbolic annihilation. It's the idea that if you don't see yourself represented or a group represented, it's the idea that they don't exist or they're unimportant. So I just want to say your work really means a lot to me, like as a mixed race, Mexican, Korean, queer femme, because like when I was growing up, I grew up in Orange County when it was like red zone, and I never saw anyone represented that looked like me or made me feel like I could be an artist. So I wanted to say thank you. And I also wanted to ask, like, especially because your work is so situated in your unique identity intersections, and like diversity and representation are now sometimes even like corporate slogans that are utilized to give people a semblance of inclusivity when they actively do things that are damaging to these same minority groups. Like, how do you walk the fine line of, you know, representing your reality in an authentic way without feeling like you're being tokenized depending on the context that you're presenting your work in?
I can speak to that a little bit. Can I? I feel like I was about to be like, well, you know, it's a balance, but like, I do think, yeah, it's kind of like what I was sort of getting, like, in the, like, previously when I was talking about, like, how do we, like, like, exist in this system that's, like, inherently all the things that we're trying to fight against, you know? And I guess the only way that I've learned to do that is to try to have a mindset of, like, you know, dare I say abundance, or, like, the more I have, the more I can share, the more, you know, and also just like checking in with my body a lot. Like, I do feel like I have like a thing in my brain now that's just like, if it feels funky, why bother? Like, if something feels off. I mean, I do need to run things by people. I have community that I can check in with about, you know, like, this feels a little weird. Am I, you know, but it's like, it's all such an individual process and journey. And I think when you have moments in your career that make you question your, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like integrity or something like that, like, you have to have those. Like, you have to make mistakes. You have to, like, to learn about what kind of artist you want to be. Like, I've been in some really fucked up situations that I found really, really hard to get out of. Today I would be like, bye, but like, I had to go through it to understand what my own compass is, and then writing about it and like kind of keeping a tally, or not a tally, but like a record of like your belief system around stuff, and like your values, and like what you bring in your projects and stuff, and not in like a rigid way, but just like so you can kind of be in that as much as you can with your consciousness. But it's not like, I just like it. I get stuck. I get tripped up constantly. So it's really imperfect.
I think that like it unfortunately is gonna keep happening till we're dead. And I think it's important that like people that look like us, we're creating objects or we're creating artwork, which I think is our way of being like, this is important. And we need people who have more power to also be people like us. And we have to fight with any power that we gain is to fight for other people like us to get those jobs, or like who give more access to others. But tokenization, girl, it's like we have a bio. A bio is potentially, it's like unfortunately never ending. But thankful to my ancestors and my parents crossing Mexico to come here and like give me a better life, and that shit worked out.
All this talk about representation, like I have a lot of like skepticism about representation, and especially, I think that I'm like coming from a place with my work of just viewing like, the image of our bodies like are just kind of deceptive in a way. A lot of times they can kind of like contradict or like belie like, a kind of like true lived experience, right? And then like that's kind of where so much of like this like societal like conflict around like trans bodies, for example, lies, and this like kind of disconnect between, how they're like, how a body like presents itself, how it's read, and so I think I just like kind of like am more interested in kind of continuing to fuck with representation in a way, and just like I don't want my work to be fully recognizable, like I am this fucking Venus or something like that, or these bodies to be, like it's like I want to kind of work in that in-between space, that like kind of space of like almost being fully recognizable, but then like playing in that zone of like really just playing with how like how can I fuck with how people perceive bodies, that moment of like recognizing a thing as a particular thing, a body as a particular kind of body, like how do I like extend that moment, disorient the viewer from from making that immediate connection as quick as they normally would with like a body that they see on the street, yeah, just like how can I make them like pause a little bit more, and that's just like a continuing like, it's just like a starting place. Yeah, I think it's like representation is like, or like a figurative body is just like a starting point to fuck it up. Because of all the other goopy, shit that like is so real that speaks to our lived experiences, speaks to queerness, speaks to like the queerness in all of us, yeah. But yeah, more representation. Yeah. I mean, also, you know, just like, and I think that, like, you know, just, I think that's also why like the rhinestones, like the iridescence, and just like kind of fucking with people's like perception in the moment, you know, of like, what are they looking at? What color is this? What form is it? You know, and just like, yeah, again, like, you know, that like kind of moment of like somebody's orientation to a body kind of being like, what's going on here? Making them just like question themselves a little bit, or work for it, you know, before assigning meaning to that body. Having to like kind of go around it, inspect it, and like, you know, yeah.
I think that's interesting because the question about tokenization, it's like, well, it's sort of unfortunately a fact. And like you said, like you have bios. Often we need to put our identifications in our bios, but then it's like the work happens in the work to sort of try to work with that system or work against it maybe. So there are these kinds of like aspects of professionalization that are just unfortunately what they are, but then it's in the work that you can push back against it a little bit, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that like, for instance, like with like the chameleon skins, like the paintings of like the close-ups of the skins, I don't think that somebody, like, I don't know, maybe, you know, some freaks like us might be like, that's queer, and then like go toward it. But I think that a lot of other people might just like approach it just, you know, on a base level of just like being like seduced by these like colors and sparkly things, and then kind of, you know, through time it kind of like slowly unraveling it, you know, more and more, and then they like realize then they're in this like space of kind of contemplating like transness and like trans bodies and queerness, and you know, they're like part of the space of kind of like fucking with like the like what's the figure and what's the ground, and like being part of that relationship. And yeah.
I also just want to say that like at some point, you know, sure, tokenization, but also there are people who genuinely have an interest in the work because of it. And maybe sometimes the word tokenization shouldn't be a negative, because we also do want people to care about the work. So it's not always a bad thing, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like the gallery work. It's like I'm not, you know, in the gallery as Zeta Zerner, like screaming at people in their face, like, yeah, you know, I mean, with with you, but the work is like a little bit. I mean, the quietness of it, the kind of ambiguity of it, like I think of that as like, you know, I get giddy off of like that as like a, you know, a subversive operation on like people that
like a
would
Trojan
otherwise
horse
like
or
see Zena
something.
Zerner in the distance and be like, whoa, too weird for me, and then like walk the other way. Yeah. And
The benefit to the options.
like, come here, children.
This reminds me of when at the opening there was this dude like looking at my work, and I was with my sister and my friend, and they were like, come on, don't you just want to go up and like see people looking at your work? I hadn't like experienced it in the space with other people yet. And I was like, no. And then finally I did, and it was actually really, really nice. Like it felt good. It felt positive. It felt like people were enjoying themselves. And then there was this one like bro who was like, and my one of my friends was there, and he said, "This is dude shit." I was standing right there, and I was like, no, it isn't. And that was so interesting, because I was just like, wow, what? But it is dude shit, because dudes get to have shit. Do you know what I mean? They get to have things like vulgarity and like.
And before they know it, they're gonna be like coming out of the closet.
That's right. And that's right. It's just like a vicinity type of thing.
I'm trans.
It's true though.
Yeah.
Oh
God.
Like
it's
these
it's
like
a way
white
of
boy comedian straight guys like fucking love me. They just can't get enough. And they love that I'm so dirty and filthy and that I'm like also a dyke. So they're like, like, oh, talk about tokenization. But I'm just like, it's like an inverse thing. It's like, it's not that it's like, it's just, again, like, why wouldn't I be disgusting? Like, everyone's fucking disgusting. But some people just have all the luck,
Should we go to the next question? Fantastic. Okay. Good evening. Thank you for your time, y'all. I just wanted to say that I feel that you three each have a stunning use of color in your work, and I'd love if you could illuminate us all a little bit on your process of selecting color and placing it in your works. Thank you.
I can just say for myself, this is just how crazy the chameleons like this is what is considered, this happens in nature. This is what's considered natural, and so I was just like embracing it, I wasn't editing it, and it was, and I wanted it to be all of the colors, and yeah.
I'm pretty inspired by like Mexican muralism, Mexican painting. So I take that sort of like bold colors into my work. And I'm still on my like painting journey. So I'm still learning.
I'm kind of like whatever's nearby, Although when I do paint with watercolor, I really like muted watercolors and I can layer them a lot and I can use pencil with that. So it's also like a tactile thing. So like, for example, with the other self-portrait where I'm being eaten by rats, that is all like muted colors because I wanted to have just a little more control over it. And then I kind of like the way it looks. Yeah, some of it is just like a tactile thing, I guess.
Good evening, and thank you very much to everyone that's both extremely entertaining and informative at the same time. So I was wondering, to what extent does your work rely on a conflict or activism, both in terms of its appreciation and the creative impulse, and what happens if, say, the fight is won during this lifetime?
I don't think it's
Sorry, I don't think so.
We'll see when we get there. I don't see, it's getting worse, so I don't know.
Like when there's not as much to push up against. Well, fortunately, all of our progress comes with a healthy dose of bullshit. So that's also, where I'm also responding a lot to is progress, and it's never progress for everyone. Progress.
I mean, also my hope is like, we're talking about representation and like we're sitting in front of you and like kind of, our bios are read off to you and like, we're talking about identity and stuff like that. But like my hope is that the work would be able to just like do its thing in the wild too. I mean, like that, and I feel like there are so many things about like each of y'all's work too, just in terms of like your use of color and like, the wildness of like the stories and just like the kind of like carnal weirdness of, and the goop of your drawings too. Like I take so much joy in that. And I think that like on a level of just like visual interest, visual pleasure, kind of like just wanting to be with this thing that like makes you think a little bit more, that you may not like, I don't know, I'm like, what's going on here? Ooh, that's kind of gross, but like I kind of want to stick around a little bit more. And I don't think that there's, and also I don't think that there's like any real like, I feel like I'm like defending or something, but like I don't think of like y'all's work like having like a kind of like singular like polemic or something like that for, yeah. I mean, I think that like, yeah, just our like fucked up queer traumas and stuff like that are a starting point, right? Yeah.
Write what you know. Yeah.
And the work also, I think, gets better with age and grows and creates different meanings. And then, my goal is to like kind of them to just lose themselves. I used to always say like once I finished a piece, it was 18 and had to move out of the fucking house.
Like honestly, I would love for people to just like see the work and have like multiple interpretations, like see what you want. Like that's the kind of point, is for people to like project some of themselves into, something that is so like deeply personal and meaningful for us and is like a reflection of us. And then like, what does that do in terms of like, bridging these like presumed like rigid and static boundaries or something like that, between different
It
bodies,
is really
different
pretty
communities.
revolutionary what you're saying about. Sorry to interrupt you.
I mean, we're just revolutionary.
I mean, we're just like tearing down walls left and right. Okay.
No.
But I do think that like this idea of, I did hear a friend call the war on subtlety? No, the war on nuance. The war on nuance. That's what it was. The war on vagueness. That's what I'm trying. The war on nuance, as in like everything needs to be ID'd, put in a box. Like, what is this about? Barbie, did it speak to this? Did it speak to that? Did it blah, blah, blah? Just like everybody extra super responsible for everything all the time. And really just like, that's not how we roll. Like, we all just know that. And like, that's like an open secret that is propelled by like fear, And so I think what you're saying is like, I love that. Just like, can the work just like exist for multiplicity in like joy, like what you're saying, like joyful experience or like interpretation. Like, who gives a shit like what people think? It's like, if they're having an experience of the work, like that's so exciting. Like the dude bro who was like, this is dude shit. I almost feel bad for being like, no, it isn't. Because I'm like, yeah, it is. You're right. You're having your thing. And well, who am I to say no? But I just sort of hated him. So I had to say that. But at the same, I think you know what I'm trying to say. Like it is, I really like that idea that, that is really like a saving grace in art is, for me, is that it's not telling me what it is. Like that's what I like about, art. or good art, I guess I would say, or good to me. Art that moves me is like, you tell me what it is to you. I don't know.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, well, I came up with a term, and the term is accidental politics. And it's like, because I think a lot of us, we just want to live our lives and like be disgusting or wear what you want to wear, but because we have to interact with this society and like all of these expectations that other people have, it's like it kind of forces us to like be political and like thinking about like the anti-trans legislation and stuff where like what does that mean? It's like how can who you are be like against the law? And I was just thinking about that and like feeling like you have to speak to it's kind of the tokenization where you have to speak to this stuff where the white dude abstraction dudes can do white dude abstraction dude stuff. So yeah, like what do you think about accidental politics?
Yeah, I mean, especially with sorry. No. I mean, especially with performance, it can't not be about our bodies. You know, people are always going to project like it being about like, oh, like yeah, like a woman or like a lesbian thing or like a queer brown thing or like a white woman thing or something like that, and just
I want zero responsibility.
A beautiful rich white woman thing, it's insane.
Of course. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think that like.
I mean, the goal is that we don't have to teach. It is a part of culture, period. Like abstraction from John.
But yeah, I think that that's
Thank
kind
you.
of where this like the freedom and that that like art presents. I don't know. It's yeah, where it could be like it's that's my body, but then it could be also it's like everything. It's multitudes. People can see other things in it too.